What if her greatest hits weren't just songs, but rituals? What if every hook carried more than melody? What if it carried something ancient? What if her music doesn't fade because those spirits never leave?
I know, because I was there. I heard my own breath slow beneath her voice, pulled apart, dissolved, until I became part of the frequency. Now I'll tell you the truth. The songs you worship weren't written in a studio. They were summoned, and once you're in the session, you never truly leave. I never thought I'd get this close to legend, not the Billboard kind, but the type that shifts atmospheres, that commands rooms without speaking. The call came on a humid Tuesday while I was mixing demo tracks in my Brooklyn apartment. A voice calm and professional. "You're needed in LA. Rihanna's working on new material. Sessions are confidential. You'll be briefed on arrival." Every sound engineer dreams of that moment. The chance to work with someone who doesn't just make music, but weaponizes it. I told myself I'd stay composed, professional, but my hands shook packing my interface and headphones. When I arrived at the Westlake studio compound, the first thing that struck me wasn't luxury. It was the temperature. Cold. Unnaturally cold for Los Angeles in July. The building sat behind palm trees and high walls deliberately hidden. Inside, the air smelled of sage and something metallic I couldn't place. Copper, maybe. Or blood that had been cleaned but never forgotten. Staff moved in whispers. Security nodded but didn't smile. A studio manager handed me an NDA thicker than most record deals. "Sign every page," she said, "and read Clause 7. I flipped to it. Under no circumstances may session audio be removed, copied, or discussed with external parties. Violation results in immediate termination and legal action. Standard paranoia, I thought. But her eyes said otherwise. The first session began after midnight. That's when she preferred to work, the manager explained. When the city sleeps, when frequencies travel cleaner. Rihanna arrived alone, wearing all black, leather jacket, dark jeans, boots that made no sound on the studio floor. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she wore sunglasses indoors. Not celebrity affectation, protection. She walked straight into the booth without greeting anyone, adjusted the Neumann U47, and simply said, "Track 9. Her voice filled my headphones. Low, hypnotic, devastating. Every syllable seemed to vibrate at a frequency that made my chest tight. But halfway through the take, something shifted. Behind her voice, I heard it. A rhythm that wasn't hers. A pattern like breathing, but inverted. Exhaling when she inhaled. Whispering in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow felt in my bones. I glanced at the waveform. Clean. Just her vocal. I told myself it was fatigue, the late hour, studio acoustics playing tricks. But when I looked up, she was staring directly at me through the glass. Even through the sunglasses, I felt her gaze lock on. "You heard it," she said through the talkback. Not a question. My mouth went dry. "Heard what?" She smiled slightly. "Exactly." When she left 2 hours later, the booth felt different. Warmer, but not in a comforting way. Like something had been invited in and decided to stay. The assistant engineer, Marcus, approached me as I was packing up. "Don't replay the raw takes," he said quietly, "and if you hear anything that sounds like voices, don't acknowledge them." "What do you mean, voices?" He looked at the booth, then back at me. "Just don't. The last guy who did..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "He's not here anymore." By the end of week 1, I noticed the pattern. Men didn't last long at Rihanna's sessions. A vocal coach quit after 3 days, leaving his equipment behind. An assistant named Devin started talking to himself in the hallways, muttering phrases in Bajan Creole. One morning, he didn't show up. His badge stopped working. No one mentioned his name again. The only constant was Keisha, Rihanna's A&R, who watched every session with the intensity of a priest guarding a ritual. "Don't ask questions about the process," she told me once. "Just do your job. Execute. That's how you survive here." Survive, not succeed. Survive. The headaches started during week 2, pounding migraines that bloomed after each session, accompanied by her voice looping endlessly in my mind. Sometimes I'd catch myself humming melodies I didn't remember learning, in keys that felt wrong for human vocal cords. One night, I stayed late to organize session files. As I exported a rough mix, the track played beyond its marked endpoint, catching a tale of audio I'd never heard during the session. A male voice, distant and distorted. "She took my name. She took my—" I ripped off the headphones, heart hammering. When I played it back, the voice was gone. Just her perfect vocal. Nothing else. But I knew what I'd heard. Rihanna never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone commanded absolute obedience. When she entered a room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Engineers stood straighter, assistants moved faster. But it wasn't respect. It was something older, something primal. I watched her reduce a veteran producer to stammering apologies with nothing but silence. She'd let a track play, then stop it with a raised hand. The silence that followed felt like pressure building in your skull. "Again," she'd say quietly, and they'd scramble to comply, even when nothing was technically wrong. One afternoon, a new mixing engineer named Tyler made the mistake of suggesting an alternative arrangement. Rihanna removed her sunglasses for the first time, and I saw her eyes, deep brown, but with something shifting behind them. Not malice, certainty. "You think you know my sound better than I do?" she asked softly. Tyler's confidence evaporated. "No, I just thought—" "Don't think. Listen." She put the sunglasses back on. Tyler finished the session, but I never saw him again after that day. Keisha pulled me aside during a break. "She doesn't break people," she explained. "She reveals what they already are, weak, disposable. If you can't handle the frequency, you were never meant to be here." "What frequency?" I asked. She smiled without warmth. "The one that separates engineers from offerings." 3 weeks in, after everyone else had left, Rihanna stayed behind. She stood in the control room doorway, backlit by the hallway fluorescents, still wearing those sunglasses despite the dim light. "Play it," she said. "Which track?" "The one you keep listening to when you think no one's watching." My blood went cold. She knew. I queued up the track where I'd heard the voice. Her vocal filled the monitors, flawless, powerful, hypnotic. And there, buried in the reverb tail, the whisper returned. "Don't let her write you down." I froze, waiting for her to stop me. But Rihanna only tilted her head, listening with that slight smile. "You hear him," she said. "Good. That means you're ready." "Ready for what?" She walked into the room, each step deliberate. From her bag, she produced something that made my eyes hurt to look at. A small leather journal, dark red, almost black. The cover seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Everyone who works with me long enough sees this," she said, running her fingers over the cover. "The ones who last are the ones who understand." "Understand what?" "That music isn't just sound. It's negotiation. Every hit, every hook, every harmony. Someone paid for it. Someone always pays." She opened the journal. Inside, names were written in flowing script. Some I recognized, engineers, producers, writers who'd worked with her, then vanished from the industry. "What is this?" My voice barely worked. "A ledger," she said simply. "Every great artist has one. Mine just happens to be more binding than most." She produced a pen, not the void black instrument from the other story, but something that looked carved from bone, dark symbols etched along its length. "My grandmother taught me in Barbados," Rihanna continued. About the old ways, about how sound carries more than just melody, how the right frequency, sung with the right intent, can anchor a spirit, can bind power. My legs felt weak. The voices in the tracks. Exactly, she nodded approvingly. They gave themselves, or fought and lost. Either way, they're mine now. They're what makes the music undeniable. She held out the pen. You've been listening well, better than most. I could use someone who understands, someone willing. What happens if I refuse? I asked. Rihanna's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then you walk away. But you'll take the voices with you. They'll follow. They'll get louder, and eventually, she shrugged, you'll break, like the others who refused. I thought of Devin muttering in hallways, Tyler vanishing overnight, the trembling hands, the paranoid eyes, the men who couldn't escape what they'd heard. And if I agree, then you give willingly, one piece of yourself bound to the work, but in return you're protected. The voices stop hunting you, and everything you touch afterward, she leaned closer. It carries power. The monitors hummed. Behind her, perfect vocals still playing on loop, I could hear them now. Multiple voices, layered, trapped, crying out in harmonies that shouldn't exist. My hands shook. What do I have to do? She opened the journal to a blank page, pen poised. Just say yes. Say you understand the exchange. That's all the old ways require. Consent. The room felt like it was tilting. Every instinct screamed to run. But louder than fear was curiosity, power, the promise that I'd be part of something bigger than myself. Yes, I whispered. She began to write. Not my full name, something else. Symbols I couldn't read, but felt burning into existence. The pen moved across the page with terrible certainty. As she wrote, the voices in the monitors surged, screaming, pleading, warning. The temperature dropped further. My breath came out in visible clouds. And then silence. Complete. Total. The voices cut off as if someone had thrown a switch. Rihanna closed the journal with a soft snap. There. Now you're bound. Now you're mine. She removed her sunglasses, and I finally saw her eyes fully. Ancient, knowing, inhuman in their certainty. Welcome to the session. Weeks blurred into months. The voices stopped. The headaches faded. I worked smoothly, efficiently, as if guided by invisible hands. But I noticed the change immediately. My mixes sounded different, fuller, deeper, with a presence that made listeners lean in without knowing why. Engineers I respected started asking for my techniques. Labels I'd only dreamed of working with called directly. There's something about your mixes, one A&R told me. They just hit different, like they have weight. I smiled and thanked him, not mentioning that the weight wasn't technical skill. It was something older, something bound. The sessions with Rihanna continued, but our dynamic had shifted. She no longer watched me through the glass with that assessing gaze. Now, when she looked at me, there was recognition, acknowledgement between those who understood. One night, during a late session, she paused mid-take and spoke directly to me through the talkback. You feel it now, don't you? She asked. The way the sound moves through you instead of from you? I nodded, unable to lie. That's the difference, she continued, removing her sunglasses. Between making music and channeling power. Everyone else is just pushing faders. You're conducting something ancient. Keisha, standing behind me, placed a hand on my shoulder. You're one of the chosen now. The ones who carry it forward. But chosen for what? I wanted to ask. Instead, I just nodded and returned to work. At home, the changes accelerated. I'd wake at 3 a.m. to find myself at my laptop, mixing tracks I didn't remember starting. The work was flawless. Better than anything I'd done consciously. My reflection bothered me most. In mirrors, in windows, in the black screen of my phone, my face looked the same, but the eyes had changed. They held something distant, something watching from behind my own gaze. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the success, the opportunities, the undeniable fact that my career was exploding. But every night as I drifted to sleep, I'd hear her voice, not singing, whispering. "You're mine now. You're part of the frequency, forever." And I'd wake with the taste of copper in my mouth and symbols I couldn't read burned into my thoughts. 6 months after I signed her ledger, I returned to the studio for what I thought would be a final session. The album was complete. Rihanna had what she needed. But when I arrived, the control room wasn't empty. A new face sat at the console, a kid, maybe 22, from Atlanta. Eager eyes, expensive headphones around his neck, that hungry look of someone who'd do anything for the opportunity. I recognized that look. I'd worn it once. Keisha introduced us. "This is Marcus. He'll be shadowing you today, learning the workflow." The kid extended his hand, smiling wide. "Man, it's an honor. Your mixes on this project are insane. I've been studying them, trying to figure out your secret." I shook his hand, feeling how warm his palm was, how alive he still felt. "No secret," I said quietly. "Just listen carefully. Always listen." Rihanna arrived an hour later, moving through the studio like smoke. She glanced at Marcus, then at me, and I saw the smallest smile touch her lips. She knew. This was the cycle. During the session, I watched Marcus fall into the same trap I had. He heard something in the reverb tail, his head tilted, confusion crossing his face. "Did you hear that?" he whispered to me. "Hear what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "It sounded like someone saying something under her vocal." I should have warned him. Should have told him to leave, to forget this opportunity, to run while his name wasn't yet written in that dark red journal. Instead, I smiled. Studio acoustics can play tricks. You'll get used to it. But even as I said it, I saw Rihanna watching through the glass, her eyes hidden behind those dark sunglasses, that knowing smile still playing at her lips. After the session, as everyone filed out, Rihanna called Marcus back. "Stay," she said simply. I stood in the hallway, my hand on the door handle, frozen. Through the glass, I watched her reach into her bag, watched her produce that leather journal. Marcus looked excited, honored to be kept behind for a private conversation. He had no idea. I could have burst back in, could have grabbed him, pulled him away, told him everything. But I didn't, because somewhere deep inside, in the place where my old self used to live, I understood the truth. The cycle had to continue. The music demanded it, and I was no longer the victim. I was part of the mechanism. I walked away, down the hallway, past the other engineers packing up their gear. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and stared at the studio entrance. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged. He looked dazed, slightly pale, but that eager smile was still plastered on his face. He'd said yes. Of course he had. They always do. As I drove home through LA traffic, Rihanna's latest single played on every station. The one I'd mixed. The one with my essence woven into every frequency. Listeners called in, raving about how the song made them feel. "It's like it gets inside you," one caller said. "Like it becomes part of you." The DJ laughed. "That's Rihanna for you. Her music just hits different." Different. If only they knew. I pulled into my apartment complex and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. My eyes stared back. Not quite mine anymore, but not quite something else either. Somewhere in between, bound, forever part of the frequency. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for understanding. The music continues. R." I deleted it and walked inside. That night, I dreamed of the studio, of the booth where she sang, of the journal with its endless pages of names written in flowing script. And at the very bottom of the list, barely visible, I saw my name. But the page wasn't full yet. There was still room, always room for one more. Because the music never stops. And neither does the harvest. When you stream Rihanna's next album, listen closely. Past the production, past the vocals that make your spine tingle, past the hooks that burrow into your brain and refuse to leave. You might hear us there. Me, Marcus, Devin, all the others whose names are written in red leather and bound by bone. We're in every frequency, every reverb tail, every silence between the beats. Still listening, still bound, still part of her power. And when the next eager engineer walks into that studio hungry for their big break, we'll be there too, whispering warnings they'll never hear until it's too late. Because once you're written into her ledger, you become part of the music itself. Eternal, inescapable, hers.